Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Psycho Opinion. Tonight we have a very interesting story. It's a story of Satan, cults, twisted charisma, and sweet face tattoos. A man compared to Manson, and even called a lunatic genius by one of his old friends. We're talking about the story of Pazuzu Algarad here in North Carolina. So we kept it kind of local tonight. This is a story pretty much everybody in North Carolina has heard about, and we also have an interesting first person's perspective on meeting Pazuzu in person and kind of what that looked like and sounded like. We're going to include that later in the show, so stay tuned for that. It's really interesting to kind of get a personal perspective from somebody who met the man himself. But to kind of give you a little background here, what we're talking about is we're talking about Clemens, North Carolina, which is a kind of suburb of Winston-Salem. It's said that there's typically only about 2 to 3 homicides in this area per year, something like that. By the displaced youth, it's described as a place where it's got a bad economy and there's tons of boredom and nothing to do but drugs. However, I've also been there myself, and I didn't get that vibe. Not that I really engrossed myself in the local culture, but the people that live there, a lot of them would say it's a really nice place to live and raise your kids. So kind of mixed emotions about Clemens. But I also think that a lot of people, when they're from somewhere, kind of feel like it's some boring rat trap. Kind of different when you're an adult and you have a family or you move there from outside. So pretty sure that's why we have the two different perspectives of that. So, kind of to start this off here, I was going to go ahead and explain a little bit of who we're talking about. And who we're talking about is John Lawson, who is, that was the name Pazuzu Algarad was born with.
His government name, if you will.
His government name, if you will. And he changed his name in 2002, but his full name that he changed it to actually translates to Lord of Locusts. So before we get to that, let's talk about where he came from. Being born in California to young parents who were said to not really get along, kind of born into a loveless marriage or a marriage that, love lost quickly. And he ended up his parents ended up leaving one another fairly early on, and he got the pleasure of living with his mom, which kind of develops a lot of the story as well. His mother was... Now, these stories, you collect a lot of information, and when I collect the information, I like to kind of go down the middle with it. So when I say these things, it's multiple sources across a bunch of boards, but that's also people's opinions and perspectives. But his mother was said to be kind of an alcoholic. So there we go. We already have somebody with a broken home and without a positive male role model and being parented by a alcoholic whore. So that's where we're starting from. Do you guys want to add anything about the childhood that you learned or anything that you thought is kind of pertinent to this, or do you want me to go ahead and move ahead?
I think too, didn't it say when he was like 13 or 14, that's when he lost touch with his father?
Yeah, he did lose touch with his father at 13. But I'm pretty sure it was a strained relationship, to say the least, from what I gather.
Yeah, but I think, in like psychology, like that sense of abandonment, along with his diagnosis and stuff, I think could add to a lot of things. Because a sense of abandonment for a child can be really damaging.
Absolutely, and I think as we talk about this and build this story, what I think we're really doing here is this is a great example of building that perfect storm. We've already got mental illness involved with, the perfect dysfunctional childhood and family, not to mention the outside influences, which we're going to kind of get into. At one point in time, he was said to be like a normal boy, for the most
used
part.
to play sports. I've seen bunches of pictures of him as a kid with a football jersey, or see little home recorded videos of him, and he's dressed up as a vampire for Halloween. And, I don't know. He seemed just kind of like a normal kid, and yeah, he had a little bit extra of, as you said, like the broken home circumstances. But I think the experiences of him kind of as like not a child, but closer to, teenage years and whatnot, really kind of set him on his path. With where he lived, the people he was living around, just kind of as someone who wasn't someone who would have a lot of friends, was like homecoming king. It's like complete opposite of who he was. He's more of the counterculture type person.
Well, I'm sure.
It seemed like his childhood was fairly normal outside of, the almost broken home scenario.
Yeah.
Well, part of what I gathered also, so I do have a personal story involving Pazuzu. It's not a personal story, I was on the other side of the state for reasons that I would rather not divulge on the show. But I was there and I met a man which a lot of people knew, it's a local story. So I met a man who actually happened to grow up with Pazuzu to a certain point. Like, they went to school together when they were kids. And not that it's much of a story, but I asked him, I was like, hey, what was this guy like? What was Pazuzu like? And he basically said that he used to play Little League with Pazuzu. At that point, John Lawson. And he said, kid was pretty normal. You didn't really, nothing stood out about him really, But he did say that he didn't see him for a long time after that, and by the time he did see him again, he looked more kind of almost like that trench coat mafia kind of style looking guy that was, kind of the 90s with that Columbine trench coat mafia sort of counterculture look, if you will. And at that point, he could tell that there was definitely something that had changed. And that's pretty much the extent of the story that the guy told me. I wish that I had gotten more interesting tidbits at that, but that's how the guy knew him, and that's all that he knew of him. There was a lot of sources that I looked at did say that at one point he did start getting picked on a lot as a kid. He wasn't a very clean kid. His mother didn't really keep him clean or bathe him well or teach him those qualities. I believe in one of the stories, and correct me if I'm wrong, or back me up if you guys heard it as well, but he even kind of had the nickname Turd Boy.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. That's depressing. It's sad.
Yeah, there was a girl that said that they called him Turd Boy, and that actually she even kind of confirmed that he kind of smelled like human feces. Because he wasn't clean, he wasn't, and unfortunately, it's sad to see that, because some kids grow up in squalor. They grow up with parents that don't raise them properly or care about hygiene and things like that. And it's really the kids that sort of suffer at that point in time.
Well, it was also too, like, I've in the documentary, it also said that he said like the dirt and filth kind of made him feel like it gave him power almost. And
well, that was later on. I'm sure that was far after Turd Boy. I mean,
yeah, but I mean, it's almost like he kind of almost enjoyed that in a way. I'm not saying like when he was little, but I don't think he ever really, even from the time he was young to older, because when they arrested him, I think he hadn't bathed in like over a year.
Yeah, I was actually going to kind of get into that, and I think that we're probably about there in the story to get to that point. I believe, and I think a lot of people believe this, that this kid, and I kind of want to see the interesting thing about this story to me, and please add on to this if you guys have any feelings about this, but the story to me really, I kind of feel for him as a kid. Like, I mean, you really see what he goes through to become what he becomes. And by no means is it okay the actions that he did and the things that ended up transpiring that we're going to get into, but sometimes you really feel for the child in the story, and the child ends up becoming the monster, and you kind of see that with this story. I feel like it's very pronounced. You have this kid, his parents don't love each other, he ends up with, bad parenting. He's the dirty kid in school. He gets made fun of. I mean, he just goes through all of this stuff on top of having, being predisposed to mental illness. And it's just, at one point in this story, I was like really thinking to myself, this poor kid,
Well, I also feel like he did lean into it,
yeah.
Bullies are unfortunately something that will always exist. But like if someone called me turd boy because of how I smelled, I would take an extra care to make sure I didn't smell of anything. And yet, you look at him as an adult where he would only shower like once a year or clean himself to that extent. I do feel like, I don't know, he didn't want to appease them or something like that. It was something that he just leaned into instead of trying to, make himself more accommodating to those around him. It's just, it's really weird of how he decided to take things. And, he did have a history of mental illness. His mom took him to some type of psychiatrist, I believe, and I don't remember why he wanted to stop going, but he eventually hit that point. And it's like when he moved into the actual house on what, like Nob Hill Road or something like that. That was when his mom got remarried, and he had such a... And I don't know a lot of the information about his relationship with his stepfather, other than they just didn't get along. He always stayed in his room. And he basically made his mom choose between him or his stepfather. But I do also feel like, once again, he was using his circumstance to further his circumstance.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, but I'd also argue the fact that if you're not taught a thing like hygiene, for example, like that's a very hard thing to teach yourself, first of all. And I'm not saying that he couldn't, but I'm saying, like, I do think that a good part of it was circumstantial in the fact that if you live in a home, like if you live, and at that point in time, I had actually heard in one of the sources, or read in one of the sources, that his mother did keep a pretty immaculate house at one point in time when he was a child. But she obviously wasn't parenting him, because anybody that has children would, you wouldn't send your kid to school smelling like turd boy. But at the same time, it's like, how much can you really affect those things as a child? And I'm just playing devil's advocate here, because I do feel like that's learned behavior, and I do feel like that's tough. I mean, I feel like it's a tough one. I feel like you probably almost don't even really fully understand what's going on, what other people are doing, like why you are this way, or what's going on with you. Maybe not even having the resources to fix it. And like I said, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, because a lot of the parts of his childhood, I really did feel like, I felt like his mother was a huge negative influence from an early age.
Yeah.
On him. The way that she treated him, the way that she went about things with him, obviously not taking care of him properly. I mean, I would say that the childhood up to, and then part of it obviously is probably untreated or mistreated or misdiagnosed mental illness, but I'd say a good part of leading up to this whole thing is his mother's responsibility, quite frankly.
Well, I think she was an enabler. She was 100% an enabler, and she chose, seeing interviews with her later on, you could just see just how much in denial and in her own world she really is. And I know that she had turned a blind eye a lot of times. And I think even possibly in his childhood, possibly because of fear or just neglect. I just don't think she I think she's just living in her own world almost.
Yeah. Jen, were you going to add something about that?
I was gonna mention that it seemed like maybe she neglected him. And I was gonna say that it's possible because of I guess the divorce that occurred between her and her, husband, her first husband. Um, I think maybe she got super depressed, and maybe started neglecting certain things that maybe weren't neglected before, um, because she was so upset and depressed and lonely and
Yeah.
And you really can't say. A lot of times, even women in that situation blame their children for,
oh yeah,
for relationships not working
yeah,
out, where they blame their children for the situation that they're in. Um, I mean, that wasn't said directly that I saw, but I mean, I see it a lot. I've seen it a lot in my life, where the child almost becomes a burden because, it's your fault that this didn't work out. It's your fault that, things didn't work out with him, or now that I'm stuck with you, or whatever those feelings might be. Um, so yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of all of that going on. And then,
some.
sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say some of what we're talking about, like what was going on with um Pazuzu, or I forgot his real name,
John.
John
um,
Lawson.
reminds me of some people in my family that pretty similar situations. They didn't go quite as far as John Lawson.
Thank God.
Yeah, but some of it is kind of similar, and it makes me really sad.
Yeah, I can
So,
see that. And kind of building on what Rob was talking about with him leaning into it, I know that when I was a child and I was in those formative years becoming a teenager, I felt misunderstood. I felt like people really didn't understand me. I felt kind of alone. I felt kind of isolated in a way. And I know that like I really went through a huge phase where I was into piercings and tattoos and really body modification. I used to have the stretched ears and you know I was doing piercings even on myself because at one point in time I wanted to do that. For a living, possibly. Not that anybody can make a living on piercing. Different story. But the point is that I was into that, and I understand a little bit of that counterculture and kind of how that feels. And it's almost like you do want to just be like, okay, nobody understands me, so I'm just gonna like take it further. I mean, it's just in a way, it's almost like becoming an outsider puts you with other outsiders, and then you find your group, if you will. Or at least I kind of felt that way as a teenager. And going through a divorce and everything as I did as a teenager, I relate to some of that. Obviously not, sacrificing animals and all of the other things that he started getting into, but I mean just the feeling of being an outsider, a feeling of kind of leaning into that and almost enjoying the attention, if you will. I mean, if I can be honest.
Or the shock
I
value.
Yeah, the
yeah.
shock value. I mean, as a teenager, I enjoyed that. I will be honest. Um, so I see that a little bit. I see sort of that part of it. Um, and then he gets older and kind of just starts developing. I think he starts developing more of his mental illness. He kind of becomes agoraphobic, and you start to see some of those schizophrenic traits as he is developing this trench coat mafia persona. Slowly turning into the Satan worshiper, Pazuzu, Lord of the Locusts. So, getting into that, I don't have a lot between the two. It's kind of like we have the childhood, and then we go into like the thing. So, getting into the thing, if you will, if I may call it that,
The thing.
the thing. So now we're talking, let's fast forward into the future a little bit here. Now we're talking about his mother's basically secluded herself in her bedroom. The house is getting trashed. He's basically building himself a little cult. I've got a list of the players here and kind of who they were, but the way the house was described, and I'll go ahead and show some footage of the house right now.
All right, let's do it. Okay. Well, this one will fail real quick.
Just on this part.
Oh yeah, probably, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely unfit for human habitat. No drainage. Touches?
I will have it for you.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's get those rooms back there.
Like over here.
Look at that.
Step.
Jesus Christ.
Sir, did you by chance get one? Right here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Is that thing dead?
No, it's alive. I think it's mold coming through the roof. Just watch your step, there's a lot of broken glass.
Okay.
Actually, you hadn't hit the worst part yet.
Mm. Don't believe any of my hoarding cases will match with this one.
And this is the cleanest room in the house.
Huh?
This is the cleanest room in the house. Get that room to go down there.
That one, yeah, I got it good. Boy, this guy had a bad case of whatever they got.
Fourth step from the bottom is kind of loose, so
Okay.
be careful on it. That one. Pretty good. Dog crap, ain't it? Yeah. Okay, I actually need to do outside and some air. Starting to get a whole lot better right here. Watch the step here. This is actually where one was buried.
God almighty.
And the food is behind you.
All right, let me shoot this facial board right here.
Just watch the step there.
Okay.
That fish is still swimming.
So there's one was buried there.
One was here, one was up there.
One was up there.
Yep. One was, it's right in front of the picnic table.
Not the big holes.
Yeah, not the hill up there, down here.
Oh, right here.
Where those bricks are.
Yeah, where you see the little bricks.
Oh, I got you. I got you.
Yep, you got it.
Damn, that cat jumped over. I scared the shit out of me.
They got me too early. I feel bad.
Is that stench just coming from the house? That smell?
Some
Oh.
of it's rain. The pool, the house, and some of it's dirt that was treated here.
When they're working in the house and come out, it brings a very nasty odor.
I'm gonna get the side and around in the front. I'll be right back.
Thank you. There's naked people all the time around having sex, public acts of sex, orgies, literally people defecating in corners. Sometimes the dogs would eat it. People using just the carpet in the living room as a toilet, pretty much. Everybody described it as, a place with no rules and no judgment. There's constantly things being smashed, glass everywhere, smells of urine and rot. I mean, the video that I just showed you, I'm sure you can almost smell it from the way it looked. Black metal just constantly blasting. I don't even know how people had conversations. Like, they must have, probably all learned sign language to be able to talk to each other from what it sounded like. There ended up being a dishwasher full of weapons. I mean, we're just talking about some of the ways that this house started to look and smell. One interesting thing that I did want to share as well, I don't know if you guys saw it, and I got an image of it. I was going to go ahead and bring that up here and read it, is that on the front door, it was posted, "No gang members allowed. Anyone that dresses the same, has the same badge, and call themselves the authority of a land they did not create. They only seized, no terrorism, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to say through terrorism, has no permission to enter this land, unless you are a native, since this is their land. Since this is the First Amendment of the faith laws, where we see you are guilty until proven innocent. If you can make laws, so can we. So be it." And then it says under that, "Evil will triumph." And that was what was on the front door if you were to walk up to this house. So this is the whole scene we're building here. This is kind of what's going on here. So with that, we have the major players, and the first thing is that he did have a main girlfriend who was named Amber, or called Bubbles, but he also eventually kind of had a little bit of a harem, if you will, with the people that he called, the women he called his fiancées. So with that, we're talking about Dixie, and we're talking about Crystal. So Amber, Dixie, and Crystal were the fiancées, and they were all...
Crystal with a K, very North Carolina.
Okay.
It's always Crystal with a K. They're the worst, too. You gotta watch out with Crystal with a K. Just saying. So the fiancées, they were all younger girls, and they were described in a few sources that I saw as, young girls with daddy issues, pretty much is what we're talking about here. And they found a leader and a male figure in Pazuzu. So, our other major players in this, and people that were kind of followers of this thing, were Nathan Anderson. If you watch anything like the documentaries, he's the Harry Potter looking dude. We got Jenna Woodring. She is the girlfriend of Nathan Anderson. We got Crazy Dave Adams, who was a very good friend of Pazuzu, and Matt Flowers are kind of some of the big players we're talking about, people that were kind of around a lot. And of course, more people into this story as we go, but I kind of wanted to discuss them a little bit. Interestingly enough, a lot of these people and others involved with this whole scenario talk a lot about how they just really didn't believe Pazuzu. Like, Pazuzu would openly admit to killing prostitutes, killing homeless people. Usually he was on drugs or heavily intoxicated, and people just said they didn't believe him. That they figured he was just talking out of his ass, if you will. So, I don't know if you guys have anything up to this point, but I kind of got us up to, this is sort of what we're looking at. This is what John Lawson, Turd Boy, became. And I'm only saying Turd Boy because I just want to keep bringing it up. I'm not trying to pick on the guy, but I'm just trying to bring it up as this, to me, that's the embodiment of partially why he became what he became.
Well, it was the catalyst for him to evolve from his chrysalis as a child into the full Pazuzu Algarad. It's important to bring up where they came from, because you have to look at that specifically to understand how they function as, an adult.
Where they came from to where they are. And as up to this point, ladies, do you have anything to add?
I just think that to me, I mean, yes, I do feel sorry for him in a way, but also no, because I think he showed a lot of just how he was, I mean, I know his mother was not the best mother, but I mean, how he had that house and how he treated people and eventually what he did, it just the entitlement and just arrogance that he showed. Even though he had a mental illness, I mean, the audacity that you have to...
The audacity!
That you have to do these things and then brag about it. I mean, he just... I don't feel sorry for him at all. I just don't. I think he was a worthless human being. I really do. He gave no value to this world.
I mean, I fully agree with that. I bring up the childhood and how I felt because this story put me on a little bit of a roller coaster as far as my emotions about it and how I felt about it. Of course, it's, you feel bad for somebody and then they become a monster and then they act heinously, and at that point in time there's no excuse, really. But understanding them, and I mean, it's kind of a complicated situation because it's like, when do you put aside can you completely put aside where someone came from and their mental illness and just have that person and the judgment of that person without considering those things? It's very difficult for me. I mean, of course, what he did, and that's where we're headed here, so we're going to get to that in just a minute, but what he did, of course, was unforgivable. And
But
Definitely heinous.
To piggyback off your point, then you do have people that do come from circumstances just like his, and much worse, and they take what they've been through and they create something beautiful and bright and add something to this world and try to fix the problems. They do something about it. And so I think that I think that he was worthless and awful, and I think that's no excuse for him to become the person he was.
I agree.
Yeah. It's weird to see someone that, I don't know, necessarily doesn't feel like shame or anything like that, and just goes 100% into something like I guess the counterculture mindset, and then creates it so much more and further, and pushes so much to be the opposite of what is acceptable. Because I don't know, I was a big counterculture person in my teenage years. I was a goth kid. I hung out downtown with all the punk skaters. They were the best people. They were my great friends, and I could have easily seen myself going to hang out at that house. Now, what was actually happening there and partaking in anything like that, no, couldn't do any of that. But with the counterculture here that I was a part of, we had boundaries. We respected people, each other, and there was just none of that. There was no shame,
Exactly.
No respect, no anything. And how does it get to that point? How does it get that far? It's just a very wild story. And it's how did it get there? Is my big question.
I think that he appealed to people with weak minds, and I think once you didn't have that weak mind, you kind of got out of that. Like Matt Flowers talks about how he went to the military and he was able to get out of that, but he still loved his friend. But at
Matt
the same
Flowers
time,
is awesome, by the way.
yeah, I really liked him. I really liked him. But the people that stayed, just he had this group of people that just enabled everything he did, and they were just allowed him to be this person. Even his mother just allowed him to be who he was, and no one, I don't think anyone just said, look, this is wrong. And if they did, I think even some of them even said, they threatened to kill him or do these horrible things to him.
I think I just wanted to add that as we get the story out, I think Matt Flowers, since you brought up, he ends up being the real hero of this story.
Absolutely.
Kind of prefacing that. I think this might actually be a really good time to go ahead and play audio clip that we have of somebody that actually met Pazuzu in his own words. We've got a sound clip here of Micah Moses explaining his take on what was going on, and some of it does jump a little bit ahead, but it's also where we're heading, so I think it's a good time for that. So I'll go ahead and play that for you now so you can hear that first-person perspective.
Okay, so my name is Micah Moses, and I'll just kind of give the story as I remember it for the most part and touch on some of the questions that were sent to me. Around 2006, a friend of mine told me that they had a friend named Pazuzu that I would get along with really well. Back then, I used to be really into Insane Clown Posse and all that stuff, and he was adjacent. I don't know if he was actually into them, but he was in that kind of crowd. And I was like, sure, he sounds cool, because I got the name recognition from being a big Exorcist fan. I was like, oh, that's awesome. She lived, I believe, around Winston-Salem somewhere, and that's where they knew each other. And at the time, I lived out kind of near Charlotte, so it was sort of on the way. and she would travel back and forth all the time. So me and her would stop off sometimes, and we would travel late at night, and we would meet up with Pazuzu and some of his friends at like Waffle House and stuff. Just for reference from the beginning, I never actually went inside of his house. All of my interactions with him were either at like Waffle House or like in a parking lot somewhere, like talking, like late night talks, late night Waffle House, 3 in the morning type stuff. So started off, I thought he was kind of cheesy. He was like your typical kind of like juggalo kind of looking person. Had big crazy dreadlocks, which I used to have. But he was just kind of like a try hard, if that makes sense. Like always trying to be like the coolest person in the room, you know? And I guess the best way to describe him really would be like the kind of guy that's like 25, 27, 30, maybe. I don't remember how old he was at the time, but in the late 20s, hanging out with like 16-year-olds, like 14 and 16-year-olds, because those are the people that haven't caught on they're a weirdo. I don't know how old he was at the time, but it was just kind of like that sort of vibe, Like it would be like, he would always have like a gaggle of like kids with him, essentially. And there'd be a handful of other like people that were like a little older, but he was always the oldest person and it was always a little off. But if you know what kind of person I'm talking about, that was, the kind of person. And the other way I would describe them is that they were the type of person, if you've ever encountered somebody like this, that would go for the most extreme like story you could come up with. Because at the time I was really into like occult stuff, and like actually into it. And he was one of those people that would always say stuff like, I got me a satanic Bible once and I tried to burn it, and then the devil came out and started making everything fly around the house, like stupid stuff, But like that person would say stuff like that, or like they like wholeheartedly believed like the Necronomicon from H.P. Lovecraft. But that was the way he was. So when I met him, first couple of times we were like chill or whatever, and we got along pretty well. And at the time I was super edgy and liked super edgy stuff, and him and his friend said, hey, we're planning a cannibal dinner party. And this time though I was talking to them was just me, my friend, him and his friend. So that was only people. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool, like just being edgy. Of course I didn't think like he was being serious. But that's what he said, and I was like, yeah, that sounds cool, just being edgy. And then over the next couple of times that I saw him, him and his friend would bring it up. And they would only bring it up when there wasn't other people around, other than like the people mentioned before. And again, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds cool, man. But he would like, I don't know, brought it up a little bit too, I won't say aggressively, but like excitedly, especially like for, seeming to be something that shouldn't be a thing, And he was talking to me about it, and I was like, well, so where are you going to get this meat from? Because I like, knew all about like Armin from Germany and stuff. And I was like, is this like somebody that like wants you to cut off a leg or whatever? And you're like, oh, don't worry about it. We have it. I was like, okay, whatever. And of course, I think that they're just, bullshitting or whatever. And they start the other like interactions. They start like, it seems like they're like vetting me to see if I'm like cool with whatever it is that they're doing. And I'm starting to get a weird vibe. Like, you guys are like way more into this than you should be. Cause like, I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. But like, I'm just being edgy. And I'm starting to be like, what the fuck are they doing? And they start like really trying to plan this thing out because it sounds like they want like a group of people to come and like cook human meat and eat it, and they're claiming that they have the meat. And eventually, I just get a little, I get a little bit like sketched out because they're being sketchy, and also like he's kind of annoying. Like I thought he was kind of annoying and like not that cool. And I was like, this is kind of annoying. I'm kind of going a little bit out of my way every trip I come up here just to like, stop and eat Waffle House with them. And they're getting, they're just kind of annoying. I'm going to just stop coming. And I think I stopped coming pretty soon after that. And I never saw him again. Well, fast forward, however many years later, I saw in the news about what had happened. And I assumed that the people that had been killed was perhaps the person that they claimed to like have the meat of. And I had called the detectives and I never got a call back. Because I was like, this is sketchy. Because I thought maybe there was something to this. Or I thought perhaps they were trying to lure me out to do something for me. I don't know, to do something to me. I don't know. But they adamantly claimed that they had the meat at the time. Well, fast forward again, years later, they put out the documentary about Pazuzu. And I'm watching it, and I realized that the people that they had found that they had murdered were several years after my encounter with him. And I'm like, is there other people that they don't know about? So I contact the detectives again, and they do call me. I tell them, I'm like, hey, I tell them the whole story. And they ask me about the other people, and I give them the information on the girl. And I vaguely remember the guy's name. I'm not going to give it here, but I did remember vaguely the guy's name. And I found at least like, I was able to figure out what his name was. And they were not aware of him. But when I had a follow-up conversation with the detective, he mentioned that the person in question, pretty soon after that documentary came out, had committed suicide, and that he was wanted in relation to some completely different murders, and they didn't know that they had anything to do with each other. Like they didn't know that him and Pazuzu had any connection of any kind. This person lived, I think it was Kings Mountain, I believe, something like that. Maybe a little farther west, but somewhere around Kings Mountain, North Carolina. And again, I'm not going to give this person's name because I don't know what's going on with the investigation or whatever. They haven't contacted me since it's been a couple of years, but I'm not going to go into that because I don't know. But this person has killed himself, and they have some sort of connection to some different murders. So I don't know what happened there. And again, my interaction with him was never like super long. I usually would be like 2 or 3 hours, maybe just drinking coffee at Waffle House. I would chain smoke and shit. And we would just like talk about like horror movies and music and occult stuff. And again, I thought he was kind of like try hard, kind of a dork, but also the kind of person that to like a 14 to 16, 17-year-old would seem super cool that they were hanging out with him, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's everything I have. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thanks.
So anyway, I think that was really interesting. Kind of hearing from somebody that met him, kind of what his experience was, and kind of almost giving us like a humanized perspective of Pazuzu at kind of around that point in time. I don't know what do you guys think of that sound clip?
It's interesting because I could have seen myself in the same shoes as, like I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, to where I would have probably been one to actually go to a house like that. But also what Mike was saying of, am I going to be the guy that's going to be eaten? Like, there's a lot of hesitation. I would have. I never met him. I don't know anything with how Pazuzu was, no first-hand account. It's just interesting. I see a lot of parallels with myself from what Micah went through, with just being that type of person. I'm just glad I wasn't in a close-by area.
I could see you with some, maybe sitting on a bed of rice with some teriyaki sauce. I don't know. That sounds nice. A little Rob fricassee,
Rob
if you
a la
will.
carte.
Yeah, there
Oh
we
my
go.
God. So
Rob, would you have gone to the dinner? Do you think if you had been around him?
I
And
don't
he had
think
invited
so.
you?
No. There's something about cannibalism that is like once you partake, it's going to completely change who you are forever. And I don't know. There's a lot of instances of people around Pazuzu like committing suicide, things like that. What did they experience that drove them to that? What ate at them? That they couldn't.
What ate
They
it?
couldn't forget. Yeah.
Pun intended?
But yeah, it's. I wouldn't have, no. Long story short, I don't think there's some things you can do that are irreversible. You can't go back to what you were before it, and that's one of those things I would not have partaken.
well, that's
Sorry, go
That's-
ahead, Les.
well how I feel about it, because that clip was my brother, and so I hear true crime all the time. I listen to so many stories. I've heard hundreds and hundreds of podcasts, just all kinds of things. And the thing that terrifies me about that, I've never had anything. I kind of just watched the documentary and I kind of listened to that. Me and my mom listened to that. And I've never had anything that personal before. And not to say that it would have happened. I have no clue, but to think that Micah could have been either at that house or could have possibly been a victim, that just really terrifies me, because at the time he was living in Charlotte. He was kind of isolated from my family because my family's more eastern North Carolina, Piedmont, eastern, middle of North Carolina. So he was isolated. So I wonder how much they knew about that, what their intentions were, and thank the Lord, my brother had the wherewithal and the smarts to listen to his gut. And I wonder, because this was in 2006, the conversation my brother had with him, and the murder of Joshua, it didn't happen to, I believe, like 2009. So
Yeah, July 2009.
it kind of, and there's also another murder that was ridiculous that he got away with it. It was a murder of Joseph Chandler, I believe, and he was charged as an accessory, and then the murder of Tommy Welch as well. So I'm just wondering,
Yeah, we're gonna get into that.
did he murder people before these murders? And just with the ease
Well,
that
they
he was
never know.
able to do, yeah,
Well, that
just
was-
the
that
ease
was-
that he was able to do this with.
Well, that was kind of what I was implying with him talking about prostitutes and homeless people and other people he's killed, and everybody just kind of treating it like it was just a joke or just him being high and trying to impress everybody.
Yeah, just brushing
like-
it off. Yeah.
Like Micah said, trying to be cool or try hard, I believe is
Cool and
the words.
edgy and
yeah.
yeah.
And
Like a poser, which is what we
Yeah.
would have called him, I guess, in
Yeah.
my high school.
And I think a lot of people did think he was joking, because he was just from what he came across, is just kind of goofy and like, it's just kind of weird.
I think he was diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, and with that, I think a lot of times people have different sides, very varying different sides. Where, I think that one thing that I heard, and it was actually, Matt Flowers talking about it, was that Pazuzu had this ability to be different with different people, or
Yeah.
different surrounded by different people. So, I mean, the guy could be a total goofball with you and then, be around a different group and be a complete psychopath, I mean, it's just that kind of switch, if you will, sometimes those personality or mental disorders or illnesses. Kind of to get back on track here a little bit, like I said, we did get a little bit ahead talking about the cannibalism, and going with Liza's enabling, that she said about his mother is that, talking about a guy without a job here, and one thing that I heard or read, and it all kind of blends together, like I said before, is that at one point in time his mother was buying him a case of beer, rolling tobacco, and once a month a rabbit to sacrifice, from the local pet store. So his mother was absolutely an enabler, and I mean, he talked about sacrificing these rabbits like it was the ultimate high. It was the greatest he ever felt in his life. He felt so powerful. He felt like he was gaining this satanic power, if you will, and it just... The natural progression of that, as a lot of people saw, was to eventually go down the route of human sacrifice or possibly cannibalism, because he was, eating the heart out of these rabbits and drinking the blood and things like that. So, with that being said, there was a couple of crimes here committed, and kind of jumping into the crimes a little bit, we have, of course, the most famous one, the one that's discussed the most, which was Josh Wetzler. Josh Wetzler was a very sad story. I mean, if you watch a lot of it, there's even this kind of side story that was a love story between, Josh Wetzler and, what was her name?
The mother of his son?
Yeah, the mother of his son. I had her name here.
And it wasn't his son named Jared?
Jared. I'm talking about Josh Wetzler's wife, or fiance.
Yeah, but his son was Jared.
Yeah, his son was Jared. Stacy was his love interest.
Right.
And Stacy and Josh, they were this young couple who were in love. They got a horse farm. They wanted to rehabilitate horses and have a horse farm. And unfortunately, Josh Wetzler, when they ran into financial trouble, it was during the recession. So they're starting to lose the farm. They're starting to lose the house. And he turns to selling drugs. A lot of people do this. I mean, this isn't that uncommon. Drugs is easy money, it's fast money, and it's good money, except for the fact that it's illegal and can cause you some serious setbacks in life. So that's the direction Josh Wetzler went in, and he ended up being caught, which pretty much everybody says it kind of ruined his life in a lot of ways. And him and Stacy became, they ended up having their problems and kind of separated. From my understanding and everything that I've seen, Josh Wetzler was an amazing father, very dedicated to his child. He was a dedicated man even to Stacy, and I think that, Stacy believed that they were going to get back together and that they were kind of soulmates. And that's what makes, this side story, if you will, this kind of love story even more sad, that Josh Wetzler meets Pazuzu. And this is the part where I'm wondering if you guys have anything, because off the top of my head, I have a hard time remembering, nor I don't even know if there was one said, but did anybody pick up on any of what the motive was, what led to Josh Wetzler's demise with Pazuzu?
It was not really anything that led up to it. I think it was just he didn't really have anywhere to stay, so he was staying there. He didn't have means to, pay for his own place. He had just left his relationship. I don't know how long it was. I couldn't say just left it. It was he didn't have anywhere else to go, and he was hanging out at the Pazuzu house, and so he kind of became a roommate at that point, or, couch surfer, whichever one it was. And,
God, imagine staying on a couch in that place.
Yeah, I know, right? Oof. But what led up to it, I don't really have anything other than, the circumstance of he was staying there.
Yeah, I was wondering
I think that was the thing with Stacy, is that she never got those answers. She even went to talk to his mother, Pazuzu's mother, and she never really got those answers of why, what happened.
Yeah, I feel like it was a moment of passion, basically. It's just a random happenstance.
But see, I don't know about that, though, because Josh Wetzler was the one that I believe he was trapped in the basement for days, was he not?
Yeah, I think they said they starved him or something as well.
They starved him, and he was trapped in the basement. And because I know that Crazy Dave, one of the players I had mentioned earlier, he was recalling Pazuzu saying, "Oh, if there's a guy in the basement, if he tries to get out, don't let him," or whatever. And Crazy Dave was like, "Yeah, sure, man, I won't let the guy out of the basement." You know, if you want to be on, if I could be honest with you guys about my interpretation of this thing, and I know the documentary we're talking about, I think a lot of those people to this day know more than they say they did. I mean,
absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, there's no way that these people didn't know more what was going on, or at least suspect more of what was going on. There's no way. I don't believe for a second that Crazy Dave didn't know that there was actually somebody in the basement, and that's just my interpretation of it.
And even the neighbors. I mean, I believe Josh. I believe he was shot like 8 times. And how do you not, as a neighbor, not think something is wrong there?
I will say that if you're living next to somebody that is constantly blasting black metal, I mean, it's probably just more loud noises coming from next door.
So they're just being loud again.
And they probably just shot for like target practice or for fun or something. Like they seem the type that would probably just do that, like out there in the backyard and give no regard to neighbors, and they probably just assumed it was that.
And the thing about that is, what I think is so odd to me too, is that the mother like saw him. Like I can't see how the mother's not charged, because the mother actually heard it, went outside, was getting ready for work, heard him shoot Josh, and then went and got back ready for work. Like, it's just bizarre to me as well.
The mother to me seemed friggin' clueless. Like, honestly, I mean, maybe not. I mean, it seemed to me that at one point in time, his mother became just as mentally and emotionally beaten down and just kind of almost as crazy as the rest of them. You know?
I mean, you gotta be to be able to live in that house.
Plus, she was probably insanely deathly afraid of her son at that point and the people he's got around. I mean, as far as I know, she barely left her bedroom.
Well, I think she was assaulted by Amber and him at one point.
Yeah, there were police reports, I think, of her being assaulted by her son, and I'm not 100% sure of like the follow-up or anything like that, but it was documented that there was an assault against her by Pazuzu.
And I believe she even told them, she said something about a murder, and they asked her to search her property, and she said no.
He said no. I mean, when the police came by, he told them that they couldn't. Which is kind of crazy to me, because honestly, if the house is under his mother's name, I feel like they would have to ask her, so he wouldn't be able to answer for that.
I think it was actually in the stepfather's name. I think that was actually his house. The deed was in his name.
Getting back on track here, Josh Wetzler was not the only victim. He was dismembered and buried in the backyard, and this is very tragic. And let's remember that this man left behind a young son, who the son, nobody knew what happened to this guy for a while. This child is thinking his father abandoned him.
Well, and it's also so the mother of his child was one of the first people to come and do a police report of a missing person, and it was the reason why, even though he never came by or whatnot, but he always kept in contact with his son. And he had never gone for that long without reaching out, without saying something, without getting a phone call, without doing something. And that's the main reason she came forward with her missing persons police report.
Well, the background information on that was actually due to Sylvia LeBeau, who was another player in this story that's unraveling. She said that she was an acquaintance of Pazuzu. The first time she met them, she went over to the house, and I guess they had her sit down and watch homemade videos, the porno-type varieties, if you will, of Pazuzu and Amber. And she ended up she heard them bragging about it. She actually made a recording, went to the police. At that time, the police didn't really pursue it. And then she was the one that went to Stacy and told Stacy what was going on. I believe this was 5 years or so after the, or no, it might have been before 5 years. I think 5 years was when they actually found, when they actually went in and did the search.
When they found the body, it was 5 years later.
Yeah, so before that, rewinding just a little bit, she told Stacy. Stacy went to the police, filed a report, tried to push it. Nothing was really happening. And this is one of many, because there was another character in this, Tarina Billings, who was the neighbor of Pazuzu, who was discussing in one of her interviews that her father actually, she believed, helped dispose of one of the bodies.
Yeah.
And she also came forward, as well as the recording we heard earlier, with Micah Moses coming forward. A lot of people came forward on this case, and it didn't really seem like it went anywhere for a while.
Yeah, Matt Flowers was another whistleblower that contacted detectives trying to get someone out there. Because hold on real quick, because we are talking about what is it, Joshua
Wetzler.
Joshua Wetzler, I think because he had a previous history of selling drugs, because I think he got caught selling mushrooms.
Yeah.
I think they deemed it a non-important case and just didn't put enough effort into it, because it's like, oh, that's just, he's part of the dregs of society.
Well, there was also assumption even by Stacy in the beginning that he was just avoiding the law. That he kind of absconded from the legal system, if you will, and was just kind of trying to not be caught or be wrapped up in that.
Well, from interviews with Stacy, that's kind of why they broke up, is she was, a very law-abiding citizen and whatnot,
yeah.
And he was kind of more of, I don't know, the government shouldn't interfere, we should be able to do our own things.
It was said he enjoyed the company of outsiders. So there was a lot of people that went and did this, including the interview or the story rather that we heard on our show. And that to me is a little wild that it took as long as it did. I kind of understand how they could think that he was leaving, but at the same time, I mean, if you saw what I saw in the pictures and the relationship this man had with his son, I mean, nobody's a guy like that's not going to leave his son. I mean, that's just my opinion. There's people that wouldn't, there's people that wouldn't, and he definitely appeared to me as one of the ones that wouldn't. So everybody's on this search for, and I wanted to say also, Matt Flowers, the interesting part about him was that him and Pazuzu actually had a conversation where Pazuzu even knew that he had tried to turn him in, and Pazuzu told him something to the effect of he can't be caught or whatever. But it's interesting to me that Pazuzu,
I'm
even
protected by Satan.
Yeah,
or
and
whatever.
They had to have a special bond, Pazuzu and Matt Flowers, because nothing happened to Matt Flowers. And you'd almost think that Pazuzu would have been like, you know what, this guy betrayed me, I'm going to do something about this, but it never happened.
Some of the things with Matt Flowers, the reason I look up to, I think he's the hero in the entire story. As flawed as he is as a human, he is the hero. Is a lot of times on interviews with him, he's like, I miss my friend. But what he's saying is, I miss my friend before he became Pazuzu.
Yeah.
And even in some of the interviews, I wanted to kill him. Like Matt talking about killing Pazuzu. And there's so much going on there, and like Matt has his own separate issues from being a vet, and his issues with what he did in the service, and it's just interesting to see how he had this great friendship with this guy before, and tried to keep that alive after the Pazuzu persona created itself, and he still loved his friend, but it was definitely tarnished. It was definitely something different after a certain point. I think that was when he left. He couldn't have his influence on his friend. Because I do think that if he didn't join the military, he would have had a positive influence on Pazuzu.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, Matt even said himself that he felt like if he didn't go away, Pazuzu wouldn't have developed the way that he did.
Yeah.
And that he was kind of a...
Well, it's almost as if, I mean, I thought that was interesting that he was even, told Pazuzu, Pazuzu knew that he had gone to the police, and it was almost as if Matt was almost his conscience and kind of kept him anchored to the person that he was before, and Matt was the only person that he allowed for that, and everybody else he wouldn't allow that. But it was almost, and everybody else was able to enable him, but Matt kind of kept him anchored to that person he was before, and kind of was his conscience, and kind of was like, I don't know, in some weird way, kind of kept him, his humanity almost in a way.
Kept him
level-headed, yeah.
Yeah.
Level-headed.
Instead of going so, maybe kept his sanity.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I thought that was an interesting relationship there.
It definitely is interesting, because if you listen to any of the interviews, if you watch like the Vice documentary, you get to see a lot of Matt Flowers, and you see how flawed he is, but he does have these codes of conduct that he follows, and I don't think that that's instilled from the military. I mean, some of it is, but like he had these standards of being a person that he followed, that Pazuzu definitely didn't, and because they were such close friends, I think he needed that. He needed Matt to be around.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that was, as you said, Liza, he was the only person that Pazuzu allowed to be that positive influence to him because their friendship was so close.
Yeah. He respected him.
Yeah, and I said that earlier, he never showed respect to anything. But the one thing he did left for years, because, he joined the military, went overseas.
I think Pazuzu called him all the time in the military as well. Like, he talked to him. They kept in contact.
Quite possibly. I don't know for sure about that, but I would hope so. Which would explain why they were such great friends. And also, as you said, Jake, why he would, confront Matt Flowers and be like, hey, I know what you did, but you can't do anything because I'm protected by Satan. And still be friends with him after still knowing that he had turned him in.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with that, and it's definitely an interesting relationship, and it's kind of crazy how one person can affect another in that way. I want to move on to the story a little bit here. So Matt started doing his thing after he was told by Dixie in 2009, November 2009. So fast forward to October 2010, Pazuzu and Nicholas Rizzi were arrested for the killing of Joseph Chandler, who was a legally blind man. They basically said it was an accident. He was kind of shot in the head in the Yadkin River. They said it was an accident, and it seems as though somebody bought that, because in the end of that chapter, Nicholas Rizzi pled into involuntary manslaughter 13 months, and Pazuzu was simply an accessory after, and he had a suspended sentence of 5 years probation.
How is it involuntary when you shoot someone in the head when you plan it?
It's, honestly, man, a lot of it really comes down to over scheduling, if you will, in the court system. A lot of it comes down to how much the victim mattered, quite frankly, and that sounds awful, but it's true. And I think a lot of it also comes down to kind of clearing the dockets and what they can make as far as deals go. You see it a lot of times. People plead down to such lower charges. It's usually the deals that they make, and it's really sad. Because basically what you're saying is that this one man's life was worth 13 months and 5 years probation.
Probation on Pazuzu, yeah. He literally walked out of the courthouse and went home.
And that's...
that was a very sad story. Awful. And his mother deserves so much more than that.
And that's really part of the saddest part of the story. I agree with that hands down. So that still didn't lead to, hey, maybe Pazuzu did kill Joshua Wetzler. I mean, we still didn't get there yet. So finally, the catalyst to all of this, 5 years later, they go in and they finally search. They finally do a real good search, and they did search once before and found nothing. I'm not sure how extensive that search was. But finally, they go in 5 years later, and they do the search, and they find what they're looking for. They find the body in the backyard, and they find actually another body, and that was the body of none other than Tommy Welch, which I don't know much about him. He definitely wasn't a focal point of the story like Josh Wetzler was. It just said that he disappeared in October 2009. It was 3 months after Josh. And I guess there's nothing, most of the stuff they say, he was walking to meet his brother, and I guess he just kind of became a victim of circumstance, was picked up and murdered by Pazuzu. And if you guys have more on that, please add, because I don't have a whole lot more on
I don't know a whole lot.
Tommy Welch.
I don't have really any information on him. I didn't find much. It's just almost a side note. And to say someone's life is a side note in itself is just depressing. Like, no one's life should ever be a side note. And I don't know. I feel like he was just walking. Hey man, you need a ride? Yeah, where you headed? Something like that. As simple as that. And he's no longer here.
Sounds kind of similar to what happened to Chandler as well.
Yeah.
And so we got one guy's life is worth 13 months and 5 years of probation, and another guy is a side note. And those are both very sad facts to this whole story. I feel like in the end, Josh Wetzler really got his family really got a lot more justice. There was a lot more attention on his case, and that's what a lot of these things are really about, especially the documentary we keep mentioning. So then that's the point we get to here, and kind of the aftermath, and then we'll rewind here and discuss anything else that you guys might want to add or have, is that so they found the bodies. It was kind of believed by a lot of people that there was more killed, but I don't think they really found evidence of that. In the end, Pazuzu was arrested, as well as Amber. Amber and Pazuzu were the main two arrested, and also Crystal was arrested as an accessory after the fact. And then from there, Pazuzu ended up killing himself in jail. From what I understand, he used his filed down teeth to points and chewed up an artery in his arm, his left arm, if I remember correctly. And they shut down the block and tried to revive him, and he bled to death.
So, from what I heard, he had actually, once he had, gotten to prison, and he always had filed down teeth. We didn't mention this earlier.
Did I not mention that in the beginning? I thought I had mentioned the filed down teeth and the forked tongue.
I don't think we mentioned either of those.
Well, those are important parts of the story.
They are very important. But when he was in prison, he was put on suicide watch because he did try to bite into one of the arteries in his arm because yeah, didn't want any of what was happening to him. Now, if that is what he died from, the case file for him was sealed for a very long time, and the knowledge of how he perished in prison was sealed. Was it him? Was it, feeling remorse or hatred for his situation that he killed himself, or was it something else? I can't verify any of that. Was it, the guards looking the other direction while someone else took care of him in his cell? It could have been any of the above. Any type of sealed case that is dealing with that is always pretty sketchy in my eyes.
Oh, yeah.
That is suspicious. Like,
It's
if he did
excessively.
kill himself that way, then why would they seal it? Why
Well,
would they be
and-
so secretive about it?
He had tried before. He was on suicide watch. And to go back and it happened the exact same way, it doesn't add up. Something was different.
Do you think it was the Clintons?
I mean, it
No.
could be.
I never heard anybody say Pazuzu didn't kill himself. I mean, I've heard the Epstein didn't kill himself multiple times, but
But yeah, no, I think
What?
that he didn't kill himself. I think it was he pissed off
wait, Epstein or Pazuzu?
both.
Okay.
Definitely both. Because Epstein did not commit suicide, and I do think that there's a very high possibility that Pazuzu didn't. I mean, if you're someone that has done what he did in prison, that has Satan across their arm, tattoos there, filed down teeth, known to be a possible cannibal, that there's certain things in prison that will make you a target, and he has a lot of them.
You know what I think?
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Go good.
I think that this was a case like we saw a lot with the Nazis in World War II. I think that he ran his course. I think that he got caught, and I think that he couldn't handle the consequences. So, he didn't have the arsenic that a lot of the World War II Nazis had when they got caught to kind of kill themselves. But I think he did it the way that he could, and sharp teeth to artery. That's what I think. I think he did it, and I think that he did it because he couldn't handle the consequences. I think that a lot of people in his situation, a lot of people that are like him, have some kind of power. Some kind of. It's all about the power, and I think when that power is taken away, they kind of realize that they have nothing.
Yeah.
He was kind of made to be immortal. You're immortal, dude. You're in jail. You're gonna die in there.
As he said, I'm not. I can't be. I can't be taken down. I have the power of Satan.
And that's what I think. I think that he couldn't handle what was going on. And then of course you got Bubbles and Bubbles, Amber Bubbles, and Crystal Madlock, I believe her name was. They're in there like the Manson women, following their man, and their man bails. So now, how much was that worth it? I mean, I guess you'd never see each other again anyway, but, you followed and went down for somebody who couldn't even take the heat.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
is it possible that it was sealed because there was neglect within, like the guards maybe didn't do their job on the suicide watch? So
Sure.
Okay.
He was on suicide watch and
Yeah.
died mysteriously in
Yeah.
his jail cell. It's big
So
Epstein vibes.
yeah. So it
Yeah.
might not be where like a guard or another inmate or whatever like actually like killed him. Maybe they were just covering because they didn't properly watch him on the suicide watch.
Yes. So one of the two, one of the
two, maybe. Yeah.
multiple options. Yes.
Mhm.
He was on suicide watch. Whoever was doing that failed. And
Yeah.
a big thing about the entire situation was I feel like a lot of failure. There were so many things to prevent everything that happened,
Yeah.
and everyone just looked the other way, like through the entire thing. That's why
Yeah.
the very first time they searched the house, that was also a sealed document, and the only so it was that, but the death certificate of how Pazuzu died. A lot of things were sealed. Can't look at them. Can't look at them. Can't look at them. Once all the sentencing happened, because it was both females, the Pazuzu wives, if you would.
Fiancés, actually. Fiancés.
Okay, the Pazuzu fiancés. I'm just thinking of Brides of Dracula.
Yeah.
But once they got their sentences, everyone had been basically accounted for in the eyes of the court. And so someone came out, and I don't have her name, but she spoke to the judge and wanted these sealed documents to be reopened and asked it in court. And you don't see that ever. Apparently, I'm not one to go to court. Let's check out let's check out what's happening. That's like a fun time. But these documents were opened because all the people that were involved had been sentenced. Basically, it was a case closed situation.
The investigation was over.
Yes, 100%. Suzu's dead. All the other suspects have had their sentences. Let's open these back up because this big person in government is asking for it. The judge deemed it, yes, let's go ahead and open them up. And it's wild that I don't know what the sealed case of his death was, but from the very first premise searches, search the premises for his house, it was blank, basically. They just didn't want to do it. It was just, hey, let's go in and just bare minimum, zero effort on all accords. From my understanding.
I mean, it definitely took a very long time from the beginning, from the first whistleblower, if you will, to the fruition of the story, for sure. I mean, at that point, they might not have even been able to save, Wetzler or Welch, but it definitely went on for a long time. That's for sure.
I will also say, if I had to search those premises to walk into that house, it's been like, well, that's the shit corner where people just poop. And you see, there are some videos of them actually walking through the house. It's
we saw one on the show earlier. I just I posted one on the show earlier.
It's gross.
I said you could smell.
Gross.
You could smell the house.
Yeah, you can smell it with your eyes.
Yeah,
it's so disgusting. So, I get that they didn't want to be there, but I think they actually. You mentioned the dishwasher full of weapons, and I think that's something that Pazuzu was talking to his friends about. I was like, yeah, they came and searched, and had that whole thing of guns in the dishwasher, and they never opened it up. So they were just like, we're in, we're out. They're like, fuck this place.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you got to check everywhere, I guess. But I mean, guns in the dishwasher, that's kind of a strange place. Then again, I mean, I guess I'd rather have it in the dishwasher than in the shit corner. So, I mean, there's that. Yeah, I mean, his mother's room was probably the nicest looking room in the house, and even then, that wasn't stellar by any means. They showed his bedroom, and I don't understand where somebody even slept in there, considering he had the box spring tipped up against the wall and just trash everywhere from what it looked like.
Well, I do think also that was post them searching, and if you search something that's so disgusting, you're going to flip the mattress up against the wall, look for things under.
Find new species of bugs.
Yeah, they would be there.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a horrendous scene, for sure. And the aftermath of it is that the neighborhood, of course, had the house torn down. You can't visit the house.
Neighborhood bought the property when it went to auction and just ripped it down.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to? I mean, literally everybody that went to that house, including people that were friends with him, said you could literally smell. I believe it was Matt Flowers that even described it as urine and rot. You know, from the front door. That is what you smelt. And that, to me, is wild. I don't know how people hung out in there. I mean, granted, you know, you want to hang out with people and you want to be one of the cool kids and everything else, but it's just like, how do you even survive in a place like that, much less go there? It's interesting that people can live in a place that officials feel like they need hazmat suits to walk through. You know, it's how does that happen? I mean, that's crazy to me. I can only imagine the kind of health problems somebody would have over an extended period of time in a place like that. So, I mean, yeah, so it's a wild ride, this whole thing. I mean, we started off as him as a child and just kind of what he went through and kind of what he became. And, you know, as I said in the beginning, and I feel like now after you've heard this story, you can kind of see building of the perfect storm. You know, I mean, it's just like we got all the stuff there. We've got this kid with, you know, who's predisposed to mental illness, and he gets picked on, and he lives with his crazy mother, and he, you know, just wants to fight back against society at some point. And I mean, I think that the reason he became what he became is because after you get picked, and this is one of my theories on it, at least, is the psychology behind Pazuzu is you get picked on enough and kind of hurt enough by people. I think it's safe to become the thing that they're afraid of. You know what I mean? It's safe, and it's got to probably even be satisfying to be the thing that
them
these
power.
Yeah, it gives you power. You fear is power. There's power in fear, and going through everything that he went through, and then being able to become something that these people that made fun of him and kind of tortured him, if you will, being something that they became afraid of. I mean, some people described it as, and it almost seemed like, because we're in the Bible Belt, you know, and it's, that area is part of the Bible Belt in North Carolina. So, I mean, it was almost like Pazuzu versus, you know, the society, if you will. You know, he was the Antichrist. He was the outsider. He was the one. And it almost, you know, and in a situation where you grew up in the Bible Belt and you might be a little bit rebellious or anything, he probably looks like a pretty attractive offer. And that's probably why he got a lot of the kids running to him, because he was the guy, you know, the guy that wasn't afraid to say no to the norm, you know.
Well, there's whenever you have a massive culture, and you know, big church energy, you always create a counterculture, and it's just wild because, you know, me being who I am, a big part of the counterculture. We heard story of Micah, and you know, he's also one of those counterculture type people. There's still counterculture. There's counterculture everywhere you go.
Yeah. Well, I think that in some ways,
why did it get so far with him specifically?
Because nobody said no.
Yeah.
That's why. What it comes down to is nobody said no. His mother didn't say no. Like, nobody said no. People.
Or get him the help.
Yeah, or try to change things. I think in a way we're all on that page. I mean, I think even Jen and I had talked, about us growing up. I mean, Jen, you were kind of in that counterculture as well, if I remember correctly, sort of,
Yeah,
with
I
a lot
was
of
like
the.
a bit of an outsider for a while. Yeah.
So do you think, how's Pazuzu looking to you? Somebody you want to hang out with?
Um,
Or could have hung out with. Then
probably
maybe,
not.
I
Probably
don't think Jen
not.
could take the
You'll
smell.
Not, yeah, not,
Uh,
definitely not that.
I think Jen would have gotten one whiff of that place and been like, "No, I'm good." I feel like if I know Jen at all, that probably, which very well, I'm not picking on you. You should be. I mean, honestly, who could be
Yeah.
in that situation? That's disgusting.
Disgusting!
well, like, I remember going to certain houses and house parties. Where we're from, there's a lot of house parties. At least when I was younger, I'm sure there are still to this day.
We're not invited anymore. We're old.
Yeah, we're old
We are
now.
old. But just the wild lawlessness that happened. It's like, oh, there's flashing lights outside. What happened? Oh, this guy who lived there stacked a whole bunch of pallets and set them on fire, and there was flames higher than the house. It's like, why would that happened? I'm not gonna say any names or anything, but like,
Wasn't me.
it was not anyone here. But eventually, I was like, this guy's pretty bonkers. I can't do this. I can't be situated with him, and I stopped going to that house. And I see a lot of parallels. I could have been someone that would have hung out, but it's.
And I think every.
Wow.
Sorry,
it's wild. Go ahead.
I think every group's got that person or maybe a couple people that take it too far. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I remember different points in my life. I mean, different groups of friends, different parties. Sometimes there'd be the guy that every time everybody gets together, he wants to fight somebody, and he's just a violent guy, and it's like nobody really wants to be around that guy, and eventually, you might even stop going because you're just like, is that guy going to be? I don't want to be around that guy.
Or, like
or there's the guy that
says something too extreme, and everyone's just like, "What the fuck did he just say?"
Yeah.
Or you got the two
Exactly.
idiots in the backyard doing backyard wrestling and throwing each other into a pile of nails, or whatever the case is. There's always something that's I mean, there's definitely multiple times that I was somewhere and I was like, this is just too much.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna die. I don't want to be a part of that. It's gonna go too far. Nobody, it's that lawlessness, and I think that a lot of normal people, even if you were on the outside, kind of like we're saying, it does hit a point where you're like, this is enough. This is too far. It's too much. And for whatever reason, in this case of Pazuzu, there wasn't that person. Nobody was like, I mean, I guess there was people that did that, but I guess what I'm saying is there's still the people that stayed and stayed till the end, really,
Helped bury the bodies.
Well, yeah, I mean, even if you were threatened, at one point in time, one of them was threatened, weren't they? Said,
Ooh, yeah,
help
one
us
of
bury the
the-
body, and
One of the girls was called in, and
I think that one was Dixie. Dixie was, I think, threatened to help. Told if she didn't help bury the body, they're going to slit her throat and put her next to him.
yep, it's like, well, maybe you'll be the second or the third victim if you don't help us. And it was basically a fear-based tactic to, like, we need your help. We're going to make you help us.
One of us.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and that is the story. Unless anybody has anything to add, that is the story
Looks like it.
of Pazuzu. What's the full
Pazuzu
name?
Algarad.
Pazuzu Algarad.
Also, it's very North Carolina that he misspelled Allah, because it starts with an I in his name and it should start with an A.
Are you saying that's very North Carolina because of the public school system, or are you saying it's very North Carolina because we just like to misspell things on purpose?
Both. For sure, both.
Well, we did
It's
say in the
just
last episode how
excessively North Carolina.
We did say in the last episode how low North Carolina was on the public school rating.
Pretty far down.
And that was that show, not this show, but just, check out that show if you want to hear more about that. Also, if you want to hear more about cannibalism, we got a couple on that as well. I was going to mention that earlier, but I didn't want to break the stride we were on. So, go ahead and watch some of our other shows. There's a lot of interesting topics and a lot of interesting opinions on it. And until next time, love you all. Do you.
Here's some workers who are taking care of the remaining parts of the fence at the Pazuzu house in Clemens. This is part of the first steps of the demolition of the house. It's still not clear when the house itself will be demolished, but this group is taking care of interior stuff, basically just cleaning it out to the point of getting rid of most of the property except for whatever the former owner may want. Here's a view from the back of the house with the fence now taken down and all the work that is going on to complete the tearing down of the house. It looks like they'll be able to complete that work on the outside by the end of the day, but it may take until tomorrow for them to finish the work cleaning out the inside of the home.
Right now.
Woohoo! We're celebrating. This is a party. We are very excited. We got the picnic spread already ready.
Mikey, you got everything you need, buddy?
The neighborhood is having somewhat of a neighborly gathering here, a celebration. They're trying to keep it positive. You can see some of that dust coming out of the house. Neighbors were saying it was almost as though that dust represented all of the evil spirits and the bad memories which this house was holding and just releasing them.
In a way, I'm relieved. I'm just sort of glad. I wouldn't want it standing there like it was.
We'll get back to our nice, quiet, very wonderful neighborhood.
Hopefully, this provides some closure for them as well. Guys?